Today we are going to cover verses 28 through 46. So maybe we can read the verses first and then come back and discuss them. So we're starting from text 28. This is where Arjuna's bewilderment will begin.
Yeah, go ahead, keep reading. Oh, it's fine now. Okay, thank you.
Arjuna said, "My dear Krishna, seeing my friends and relatives present before me in such a fighting spirit, I feel the limbs of my body quivering and my mouth drying up.
My whole body is trembling, my hair is standing on end, my bow Gandiva is slipping from my hand, and my skin is burning.
I am now unable to stand here any longer. I am forgetting myself and my mind is reeling. I see only causes of misfortune. O Krishna, killer of the Kesi demon."
Okay. I do not see how any good can come from killing my own kinsmen in this battle, nor can I, my dear Krishna, desire any subsequent victory, kingdom, or happiness. It's a very long, several verses together.
O Govinda, of what avail to us are a kingdom, happiness, or even life itself, when all those for whom we may desire them are now arrayed on this battlefield?
O Madhusudana, when teachers, fathers, sons, grandfathers, maternal uncles, fathers-in-law, grandsons, brothers-in-law, and other relatives are ready to give up their lives and properties and are standing before me, why should I wish to kill them, even though they might otherwise kill me?
O maintainer of all living entities, I am not prepared to fight with them, even in exchange for the three worlds, let alone this earth. What pleasure will be derived from killing the sons of Dhritarashtra? So here it's very interesting, in these three verses, Arjuna uses three different names for Krishna. So first he addresses him as Govinda, then he addresses him as Madhusudana, and then he addresses him as Janardana. So just a little context why he uses his names. So he calls him Govinda because Govinda means one who satisfies the senses. So Krishna...
No, it feels like someone's writing.
Yeah. So he's addressing him as Govinda because he says, you satisfy the senses of everybody. So why don't you want to satisfy my senses? So he's basically asking Govinda to satisfy his senses at this point, which means don't ask me to fight. And then he calls him as Madhusudana because Madhusudana means one who killed the demon Madhu. And so just like Krishna killed the demon Madhu, Arjuna is asking him to kill the demoniac doubt that he has this in his heart, that whether he should fight or not. And thirdly, he addresses him as Janardana. Janardana means one who kills the enemies of people, or one who maintains everybody. So he says, well, you kill the enemy of everybody, so why don't you kill my enemies as well and let me go to the forest? So it's very interesting how he uses these names to basically ask Krishna to do what he wants. This is his mentality.
Sin will overcome us if we slay such aggressors. Therefore, it is not proper for us to kill the sons of Dhritarashtra and our friends. What should we gain, O Krishna, husband of the goddess of fortune, and how could we be happy by killing our own kinsmen?
O Janardana, although these men, their hearts overtaken by greed, see no fault in killing one's family or quarreling with friends, why should we, who can see the crime in destroying a family, engage in these acts of sin?
With the destruction of the dynasty, the eternal family tradition is vanquished, and thus the rest of the family becomes involved in irreligion. When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become polluted, and from the degradation of womanhood or descendant of Vrishni comes unwanted progeny.
An increase of unwanted population certainly causes hellish life, both for the family and for those who destroy the family tradition. The ancestors of such corrupt families fall down because the performances for offering them food and water are entirely stopped.
By the evil deeds of those who destroy the family tradition and thus give rise to unwanted children, all kinds of community projects and family welfare activities are devastated.
O Krishna, maintainer of the people, I have heard by disciplic succession that those whose family traditions are destroyed dwell always in hell. So here he's trying to convince Krishna that these are not my arguments. Actually, I've heard it from the great sages in the disciplic chain. So therefore you should believe me.
Alas, how strange it is that we are preparing to commit greedy sinful acts,
Greatly
sinful acts. Driven by the desire to enjoy royal happiness, we are intent on killing our own kinsmen.
It's very interesting that in all these verses he's addressing as we, like vayam. So he's including Krishna also. He's trying to include Krishna in his arguments, that we are doing this, we are committing this greatly sinful act. So trying to give Krishna the guilt trip also, so that he will come on his side and say, okay, let's go to the forest together. Better for me if the sons of Dhritarashtra, weapons in hand, were to kill me unarmed and unresisting on the battlefield. So this is an interesting statement. He's saying that I can't do this and it's better for me to die.
Sanjaya said, Arjuna, having thus spoken on the battlefield, cast aside his bow and arrow and sat down on the chariot, his mind overwhelmed with grief. So I don't know about you, but as I'm reading this section, he has convinced me, right? Such strong arguments as to why it's not a good idea for him to fight, right? And so it'll be quite an interesting journey for us to see, the flaws in this argument. Even though it appears that his arguments seem very noble and on very
moral
sound,
and ethical.
Very ethical. And that's sort of our discussion today, his bewilderment and his turning point, but then also trying to see the bigger picture through all of this. There is a bigger picture, and it also pertains to our life. So let's jump into it, and so if you have any reflections or questions, keep writing it, and then we'll address it.
And this is Arjuna's existential crisis. Started with uncertainty as soon as Krishna put the chariot in front of his beloved grandfather and teacher, and very quickly, because of his deep attachment, it turned into bewilderment and basically existential crisis. That's the turning point for him. Where am I going? Why am I doing this?
So, so initially he had this doubt, and then in order to allay his doubts, he started giving his reasons. So this entire section, the great teachers in our line, they have divided these reasons and they have categorized these reasons. So there are 5 essential reasons that Arjuna actually provides to Krishna as to why he should not fight. So we'll cover those. So these are the reasons. He gives in verses 27 and 28, he talks about compassion, and then
he's feeling compassion for his family, friends, and all the soldiers. He sees that when he sees the faces of all the loved ones and all the soldiers, he feels that why should they be killed just for my sake? And his heart has overcome with compassion. And Prabhupada writes that this is the quality of a great soul, that they have this natural compassion in their heart and they're thinking of the well-being of others.
At the same time, Prabhupada also makes another point. I think that image is there. Maybe
we can go now and then come back.
Then come back. Yeah, it's a good idea. So he also gives a little analogy of a man who has fallen into the water or the river, right? And a person, so compassion is a wonderful thing, and we want to cultivate and develop this deep mood of compassion. At the same time, we want to practice what's called complete compassion. That includes the object of that compassion is the body, the mind, and the spirit, and not just one aspect, or it's limited, right? So here we see a man who tries to save a drowning man over here, but instead of saving the drowning man, he saves the shirt of the drowning man, and he's feeling very happy because he thinks he has saved the man. So bringing to focus the idea that for any compassion to have a lasting impact, it needs to include within its jurisdiction not just the body, not just the mind, but also the real self of that person.
And that is the compassion that will bring complete satisfaction to the person who's offering the compassion, and also the person who's receiving the compassion.
And then the next one is enjoyment.
And this is a big part of his argument in verses 30 through 35.
Keshi demon,
Madhusudana.
Speaking of dogs, Guru Snoopy, compassion, mystery of essence. Yeah.
So enjoyment is a big part of his Arjuna's argument. You can see those verses, they start with kim bhogena rajena kim bhogera jivitenava kim. So all those verses start with kim, and kim in Sanskrit means what will I gain, what enjoyment will I gain, and essentially it basically means what's in it for me.
Yeah.
Kim, what's in it for me. And this is his, so he moves from, you can see how Arjuna's mind is rapidly moving from one emotion to another. And here now he's suddenly feeling, okay, compassion, good, but what about me now? What's going to happen to me and my enjoyment, my family members, my friends and family, all of them are killed, then what will I get?
And even if we win,
Yeah.
how are we going to enjoy?
Yeah.
Right? That enjoyment means nothing.
Yeah.
And it's and connected to that mood of enjoyment is this fear of karma, because he's also afraid that there'll be some sinful reactions because of which he may actually have to suffer great reactions.
And he talks about that oh Krishna, he calls him that how can in your presence somebody incur sin? So he's kind of in many ways in this dialogue he's also kind of challenging Krishna, that
He's trying to pin him down too.
that in your presence how can you allow me to commit this great act of sin which will bring me bad karma, so much bad karma.
And the other argument that he gives us, which is very compelling, is the destruction of family and traditions. He says that this war will create such a destruction, and as a result, the women, as the men go out to fight, the women will be left alone, and
Children,
the
old
children,
people.
So he's concerned about the most vulnerable section of the society and its impact on them. And he says that how when women are left alone with their children and they have no one to support, then there are unscrupulous elements who might try to take advantage of them and exploit them. So his concerns are very, very
It's like the single parent, right?
yeah, it's hard, there's it's not an easy thing. So he's concerned about the family unit breaking down. And then as a result of all of this, he experiences what leads to this is indecision, which actually we'll tackle in the second chapter. That's where we see his indecision.
And he's not only concerned about the broken families, but he's concerned about also the ancestors who are in the higher planets. They depend on many of these spiritual activities performed by their descendants, and if they are not taken care of, then these ancestors may also fall down. So he's concerned about people in this world and people of the other world as well.
So let's see. So here is something that has always been something that has really inspired me, is this example that is used by Prabhupada about if you take a little pebble and you throw it in the water, and if you keep throwing the pebble in the exact same spot, right, then it'll create concentric circles, right, each around that one center. But if you have conflicting centers, right, so if you throw a pebble in one place and then you throw a pebble in some other place, then the concentric circles, the circles that will form will all be in conflict with one another. So so we can see here that if we actually categorize Arjuna's arguments, they can actually be categorized in these three categories: I, or me, and then my family,
And friends.
my family and friends, and then my community, my society, my country, right? So this actually, it's a very interesting concept where generally we think that anything outside of me is being selfless. But the Bhakti text described that this is considered to be concentrated self-interest, and this is extended self-interest.
So it's kind of self-interest or selfishness. This is even when somebody does something for our own sense of being is kind of it's like a torchlight. So at the center of the torchlight is the bulb, which is us, and then the beams goes further to family, friends, society, and they are only the presence of the family and society is there because they are meaningful to me, and as long as that is there, then the person is concerned. So but ultimately everybody is concerned about themselves. This is the whole concentric circle of me and mine, basically.
And so, it's sort of like, he's talking about the family, he's talking about the society, but ultimately he's really just talking about himself. And when we are saying himself, it means the bodily concept of himself, right? He's thinking that I am this body, so my relationship with my family, which is based on this body, is mine, right? And then my society. So everything is an extension of that falsely placed conception of self. And as a result, when he's trying to adjust all of this, he's finding all of these circles conflicting with each other. However, just to...
And as also you'll see that for every level there is... for every level of this this relationship, there are different sets of dharmas that are described in our Vedic texts. And because his conception is narrow based on the bodily conception, these dharmas are colliding with each other, and this is the turmoil Arjuna is experiencing. Which dharma should I follow?
And that is the nature of material dharma, right? So, but we just wanted to share with this really quick thing. This is when you have one circle point, right? And such beautiful, peaceful circles are created. So kind of, indicating that instead of having different circles fighting with each other, when you have, a common self-interest, right? A common interest based on the big S self, right? Then we can have this peaceful circles around it.
Otherwise, what we are extending is this
our own ego,
our own self-interest, basically.
Oh, so we think that, when we are looking at Arjuna's turmoil, we think, okay, this is something that's in the Bhagavad-Gita. But it's amazing that these questions of these moral dilemmas have been debated and thought about again and again. And in fact, I was reading how this dilemma that we are going to be talking about has come back in our discussion again because of the whole self-driving cars, and people are thinking, okay, what does it mean to be just? And how do we understand what's right and what's wrong? And so Arjuna's problem is not so black and white, so many shades of gray, right? Should I turn right or should I turn left? Should I do this or should I do that? So this is a very famous problem that maybe some of you are even familiar with. It's called the trolley problem. So we'll watch it and then we'll talk about it.
A runaway train is heading towards 5 workers on a railway line. There's no way of warning them, but you're standing near a lever that operates some points. Switch the points, and the train goes down a spur. Trouble is, there's another worker on that bit of track too, but it's 1 fatality instead of 5. Should you do that? Many people think the right thing to do would be to switch the points, to sacrifice 1 to save 5, since that produces the best outcome possible. Now imagine the train heading for the workers again. This time it can only be stopped by pushing a very large man off a bridge. Its great bulk would stop the train, but he'd die. Should you do that? Most people say no. But why not? Both thought experiments are cases of sacrificing one to save five. What the trolley problem examines is whether moral decisions are simply about outcomes or about the manner in which you achieve them. Some utilitarians argue that the two cases are not importantly different from each other.
See, you can watch this on your own time, but essentially we can see that very nice, Delia. Yes. Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit. So the point being that, yeah, this trolley problem indicates that moral dilemmas on the level of the material plane are not easy problems to deal with. And it just it's a lose-lose situation,
because the mind, this problems, this material world is full of this duality, which is right and wrong, good and bad, and our mind, also being material or matter, is also filled with this duality. So one kind of duality cannot really resolve another kind of duality coming from the same source.
And so in the case of Arjuna, we are seeing that how he's caught up between a rock and a hard place, and he doesn't really know what to do, and it's not such an easy thing to discuss. So now this is where it gets really interesting, that what Krishna does is that instead of addressing the problem directly, he sort of, like people say, right, you think inside a box, you think outside of the box, and Krishna kind of just questions the entire box. And he says that, well, in order to understand anything, why it's important to save one person over five, or save five over one even has to first get down to the drawing board and think about what is life, right, and why is it worth saving.
And then, like, while Arjuna is expressing his bewilderment, but there is a certain amount of arrogance that he's also exhibiting, because just the way he's presenting his arguments, it's like, Krishna, you should understand this. I mean, we should not be incurring sin, and I have heard from great sages, so we should respect. So there's a sense of that arrogance in Arjuna, and this is what is kind of prohibiting him from really understanding what is right and what is wrong, and what's the best thing for him to do.
I think there are some comments. I would never allow the Three Stooges to die. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, that it's, if one is faced with those kind of choices, you don't want anyone to die, right? So this is actually Arjuna's tug of war between dharmas. And we've talked about this word dharma so many times, but I think it's a good place for us to talk about how the word dharma can be applied to many different levels of consciousness. So at a personal level, right? So our own self, trying to protect our own self. There's a duty that we have towards ourselves, and we have certain duties towards our family. We have duties towards our society, our country, towards other living entities, even towards our forefathers, our ancestors, according to the Vedas. So there are so many duties, and
depending on who you are, your duties may be different. Like the duties of a king are different from the duties of a brahmana or a duty of a business person. So there are certain duties which are different. There are certain duties which are common to all of them, and therefore this creates this whole conflict. What is my dharma? And dharma at the same time also means not just duties, but also our original nature, and how do we take care of that. So that also many times comes in conflict with our material duties. So this is the great tug of war that Arjuna is experiencing on behalf of us, to actually show the way that this whole Bhagavad-Gita, sometimes people think about the Bhagavad-Gita as Krishna's argument to convince Arjuna to fight, but that was not Krishna's motivation. The whole Bhagavad-Gita is about a discussion about dharma.
Actually, war is simply a placeholder.
Yeah.
We may not find ourselves literally standing on a battlefield, with bow and arrow, right? But we may have our own personal battlefield, and our own motivation as to take action or not to take an action. And in this case, we see that what are those dharmas that are at war within Arjuna's mind? Well, for one, he has some political dharma. He's a warrior. He's supposed to be in charge of this great kingdom, and he's supposed to be protecting them. And that's conflicting with his own personal dharma, and then his and then it's conflicting with his family dharma, that he also has a responsibility to it. I was actually thinking of a situation where, say, there's a judge or a police officer, and he knows that one of his family members have committed some really horrible crime. Then, right? So there is some tug of war going on, that should I stand by the side of my
family
or my family
justice.
or justice, and sometimes people also feel that, oh well, Duryodhan this is just a war between two people trying to claim a kingdom, but it's not. It's really a war between establishing a rule of law, a rule of justice, because this king, this other guy Duryodhana, was a very I was just hearing today about how it's not the level of corruption that was in him, that he was imagine trying to sexually assault not just any woman, but the wife of the Pandavas, right, in not just in any place, but actually in a police station or in a
court of law, the Supreme Court,
like in the Supreme Court, right? So he was unscrupulous, and he was very, very he wasn't fearful at all. So if a person like that came to power, then that would definitely create a lot of confusion and a lot of like a terrorism, right, within the kingdom. So Arjuna is kind of, his compassion seems like a noble sentiment, but then it's also that this guy that he's fighting against is actually a criminal. So we'll continue. So this is another thing, we were just looking at different ways how to analyze Arjuna's arguments, and this is Kohlberg's. He talks about these stages of moral development or moral decision making, and this is kind of where Arjuna is right now. And he talks about these 6 stages, and he says that how the first 2 stages, they are like pre-conventional. And at this stage, a person makes a decision simply based on one's own self-interest.
So like avoiding punishment or what's in it for me, basically.
Yeah, the two. There's self-interest and punishments. And we see those things with Arjuna, right? That Arjuna is, he says, when he's talking about karma, he basically doesn't want to deal with the karma of it.
Right.
And self-interest, of course, his own happiness. And then beyond those 2, there is the second stage, which is the conventional level.
And that is like goodbye attitude. Arjuna is a good person. He's a devotee. So he's exhibiting those compassion, those qualities of compassion, thinking about the well-being of others. And then he's also concerned about the law and order situation, right? He wants to maintain the law and order in society so that families won't be broken and the social contract will be taken care of so everybody can advance in their lives.
And then Kohlberg talks about the final, which is post-conventional model, and he says that most people don't even really get there because that's a place where one has gone past just rigid good and bad, but is actually connected to conscience. And I found that very interesting because even though the language is different, but essentially what he's saying is that at that stage you are so deeply connected that you can actually understand the greater good and be able to act on the basis of a universal ethical principle, right?
Right. And it's something that basically harmonizes the other 5.
So we were just thinking that how all the great sages, and even in Srimad Bhagavatam, we see how they're very much concerned about the greatest good for all people. And actually in Nimai's college, they had a club that was called Effective Altruism. And where they would like look at, this was just a club where one of the things they do is they look at different altruistic activities to see what are the benefits and what are the pros and cons of this activity and how is it really benefiting society. So this is actually one of the focus of whatever actions we do, how is it actually helping the world, and what is the impact of this? Like we talk about carbon footprints, right? So same thing, like what is my footprint?
And this whole moral dialogue or moral landscape has been greatly analyzed by one of our great teachers. His name is Bhakti Vinod Thakur. He was present during the time of like the early 20th century, 19th century, and he was a magistrate in the British government, and he was also a great devotee of Lord Krishna, and he wrote voluminous. He was a brilliant mind, and he wrote voluminous literature. So this is what his analysis of this Vedic paradigm is, from ethics and morality is. So he divides into 5 categories: the immoral materialist, a person who has no ethics and no faith in God. So they just want to enjoy the world and do whatever they want to do.
And then the second one is non-theistic moralist. So this person, he does not really believe in God or has no connection, but he believes in morality because he thinks that morality keeps the fabric of society intact. And then benefits him. So he is interested in morality. And then
the next one is theistic moralist. So he believes that there is something called God, and then he has some faith in it. But when push comes to shove, his faith in God he gives more importance to morality than faith in God, basically.
So in any given situation, if there's a conflict between the two,
right,
then for him the morality is more important. And then the last one is a pretender who poses himself to be a great theist, but then actually he's very immoral. And actually it's interesting, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that out of these 4, the pretender is the worst, because it's sort of like a crane. He uses the example of a crane who stands by the on the shores of a river on one foot, right? And it almost looks like he's this big yogi and he's given up this entire world and he's just meditating. But then as soon as a fish comes close, and he's standing in the water, right? As soon as a fish comes, he grabs the fish, right? So he says that the pretender is the worst.
Krishna also denounces a pretender. In the 2nd chapter, we'll see he calls them Vedavadarata, which means somebody who is a pretender. And because they destroy the faith of so many people who are actually genuinely looking for something, a charlatan, basically.
So here we see that, the reason why it's important to understand that even though Arjuna's moral arguments are good, but they're not good enough. Why? Because without a connection with the source, without connecting morality to the source of all morality, and understanding that ultimately the reason why we follow any morality is because it has its roots and it stems from the absolute good. What happens is that even though we want to be moral, Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about how because of our inherent nature, which is selfish, we are not able to stay on that platform. And so great moral endeavors are covered with, with either selfish motivation or even selfish actions.
Because our senses are not fully controlled. They're still...
Our mind and our senses, they're not in our control. So here, Arjuna is sort of being a theistic moralist, which means that he believes in the absolute, Supreme Lord, but then he's putting more emphasis on just moral ideas, and that is a struggle. And this is actually, if one could say, one of Bhagavad-Gita's greatest thrust is to help us, shake us out of this sort of mundane morality. Because we are so rooted in this good and this bad, and if I do good, good will happen. If I do bad, bad will happen. And so the Bhagavad-Gita is not really promoting war, but it's sort of helping us see beyond just good and bad, and go beyond mundane morality and come to the highest place of morality, which is where a person acts not just because this is good and this is bad, but because this is pleasing and this is it's connected to the source and it is pleasing, and
it's an alignment with the source. And so the 5th kind of moralist is a devotee who has faith in God, and then who puts God over just mundane morality.
Because the reason is because morality relates to this mortal world. Morality is an aspect of this mortal world. Why? Because this mortal world is the place of duality. So there is good and there is bad, and there's summer and there's winter, right? There's just and there's unjust. But Krishna is actually welcoming us into the absolute realm, the spiritual dimension, where there is no time, there is no space, there's no concept of good and bad, where it's all good, right? And so when we hear about, for example, Krishna's activities, sometimes the moralists get very shocked, right? Even when they read the Mahabharata, or when they hear how Krishna dances in the middle of the night with the gopis, they feel very shocked. But that is Krishna's plan, to kind of shake us out of this moral paradigm that we have created and help us enter into this other paradigm.
Because when we are in this mundane morality, we think that I have created this whole landscape of morality, and I am the defender of this morality. And rather than thinking that I am just in a borrowed place, and this material world is not created by me, its laws are not created by me, I am just being tossed around. So able to recognize that what is the source of this place where I'm trying to enforce this morality, and perhaps the person who is the source, they know morality, or he knows the morality more than what we know.
Yeah, we'll address that, Amit, about a practical example of looking beyond good and bad, beyond mundane morality. So we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll just finish this. So this is a poem by Shakespeare. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it's nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep. So it's kind of Arjuna's a dilemma, and it's also the dilemma of so many of us, that what does it really mean to be a spiritualist? Does it mean that we should just accept, or should we stand up, right? So the $1,000,000 question, and just to wind up, that Krishna is going to address all of this by taking us back to the drawing board.
And this is what great Einstein says, and this applies to Arjuna, and this is Krishna is the original Einstein in one sense, that we cannot solve the problem. Arjuna's problem cannot be solved from the same level of consciousness that he is put himself into. So it needs a different out-of-the-box solution.
So all of these moral dilemmas,
Yeah.
they have to be looked at from a different level of consciousness, and that's what we're going to do starting next time.
And as a result, Arjuna, in the end of this chapter, he says, Arjuna, Govinda, I shall not fight. So it's kind of a declaration. He's making his decision. He's not asking Krishna whether I should fight or not. He's saying, I will not fight.
So we'll stop here, and now we'll take questions, reflections, and comments. I think I already saw a few questions. So many questions.
Yeah.
And Naji, I just wanted to, I guess, give you credit. The same question that, I mean, you sent me such a nice example also about how, like, suppose there's a family problem about over wealth and property, then is the Bhagavad-Gita saying that one should stand up and do whatever it takes, you know, destroy the family, you know, destroy everything just to go in a courtroom and fight over it. The Bhagavad-Gita is, you know, all of these examples are simply placeholders to help us transcend this realm. You know, it is not really stating a course
That one should fight.
Yeah, it's not stating a course of action. Sometimes it might be wise to take up the bow and arrow, and sometimes it might be wise and dharmic to just tolerate.
Yeah, Bhagavad Gita is not about war. It is not about Bhagavad Gita is not about violence, nor is it about silence. It is about transcendence.
So let's go back and see all your questions. Let's see, what do we do? Conscience is really important, Naji says, one of the most important ethical faculties. I don't even know where to start from. I'm just going to start from Ankush Shukla here. What do we do if we're having trouble identifying our dharma?
Well, we always have our dharma at the soul level, right? That if we try to tune that dharma, then the other dharmas, in this age of Kali Yuga, anyways, our bodily dharmas are all mixed up. And when we try to tune our original dharma, then it's a lot easier to do that, because there is no duality there. And in terms of our other duties, those dharmas will naturally follow along if we take care of this main dharma.
Yeah, we need something that reconciles everything, right?
Yeah.
Because we're living in a world of opposition. So we want something that brings and ties everything together, and also brings in this quality of all good. And so bringing in our supreme dharma, which is who we are, will transform all the other dharmas. So is Arjuna being a theistic moralist here? Yes. If theistic moralist learns how to find trust,
Surrender to Supreme, she can become a yes.
Yes, very nice. Could you give a practical example of looking beyond good and bad, beyond mundane morality? I mean, there are examples in our okay, here is another point that we need to consider. In general, a devotee always honors the moral conduct and the moral codes, and will not try to take advantage of his spiritual position to break the moral conduct that is given. In fact, devotees are walking down this path of morality, but at the same time there are situations like Prabhupada gives the example of the gopis, and they were willing to come and be associate with Krishna even though they were married, right? Or Prabhupada gives another example of
like Yudhishthira being asked to lie when about the death of Ashwatthama, so that Drona could be killed. And so this is a great example, because it brings out Yudhishthira, who never spoke a lie, was asked to speak a lie by Krishna himself.
and he hesitated because to him his attachment to his being a truthful person was bigger than being a devotee. So something like that. There's more, I think. Do we know the battle of Kurukshetra is righteous because Krishna says so? Are there other battles we think might be righteous but are not? You just answered my question. In the beginning, when I read Gita and reading of the quote of BG, it's not about violence, not silence, but transcendence. Does this mean that devotees aren't also moral from the viewpoint of this material world always?
Yes, devotees are always moral, but they are moral not just because they value morality for the sake of morality. They are moral because morality is pleasing to Krishna. So their sense of morality is also connected to the source. So the mundane morality is then also becomes transcendental morality because it has a higher purpose. For a theistic moralist, the morality is serving a purpose to satisfy his needs in the society, basically.
And a theist moralist would become very shocked
Yeah.
if he sees anything that gets in the way of that.
Yeah.
So, for example, a devotee also takes care of his family and serves the family, serves the nation, serves the community, understanding the relative position of each of those dharmas in relationship to the supreme dharma. Right? So that's the only difference, really.
And because you see in the Vedic paradigm, in the Varnashram system, at a certain age, a person is encouraged to just leave home and then go to the forest to cultivate their own spirituality. And somebody may think, oh, this is being so selfish. What about... So, but sometimes it conflicts with the dharma of the family. But then by taking care of his spiritual life, he actually distributes the benefits to the whole society as well as his own family.
Yeah. Like Buddha. Some people even look at great personalities like Buddha and also Lord Chaitanya, who were married and then they just left in the middle of the night, and a moralist will balk at that and say, oh, that was such an immoral thing to do for him to just leave. But there is a higher reality that kind of overshadows just mundane morality. I hope that that sort of gives a good understanding. If there is any more questions, if somebody wants to speak, then we would like to hear, because it's a little, we've been speaking for quite a while.
Put the gallery view.
We'll just put the gallery view. Yep, there you guys go. Divakar, what do you think? I'd like to hear from you. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the lecture. It was very illuminating. I was thinking about the question of morality. And kind of my thoughts are, I think definitely devotees sometimes have to be immoral from the point of view of the material world, right? Because when the ISKCON movement was getting started, the people who started it had left their families, who them were upset that like they chose to leave like the path that society had given for them. I'm sure their families would have thought that wasn't moral, but they had to do it anyway, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And that happens always whenever somebody takes to spiritual life. Even now, you'll see that sometimes the family members, they are not happy. That why is this person kind of out of fear or whatever, people have that issue that, and then this is a eternal tug of war between these two dharmas.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I was thinking that Arjuna's arguments are very convincing worldly arguments. And then Krishna, I've read like the complete Bhagavad-Gita before, but he goes and he explains the more bird's eye view of reality and everything, right?
Yes. Very nice.
Yeah, he'll dismantle each of Arjuna's argument, as we'll see starting with second chapter. He'll dismantle each of his arguments with sound logic and the higher dharma.
Anybody else? Yeah.
I was thinking that Krishna is so patient teacher. He kept on listening to all the friends that Arjuna kept on saying, and patiently listen to each one of them, and then slowly address each one of them. So that's the quality of an excellent teacher.
That's true. And actually, he does that with each one of us. You know, he sits within our heart and listens to all that we keep saying, right?
And he has a smile on his face. You will see in second chapter, Krishna has this mild smile on his face when Arjuna finally says, I don't want to fight. So Krishna starts with a smile.
And he's probably thinking famous last words. So, you know, we do this all the time. I mean, I did that myself. I remember when I first started, you know, going to the temple, and we were just newly married at the time. And I still distinctly remember we were driving back to Fairfax and we took this exit. And I told my husband, I said, this is all well and good. We are going there, but, you know, let's make a pact. We're never going deeper than this.
Just one round a day.
Yeah, we'll just keep it at this level. So, you know, he gets to hear all that and think, yeah, right. See.
Hello, Lopaji, this is Om.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Om.
Hare Krishna ji. It may not be relevant, but my question always have been in mind when I utter this mantra, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. When does the God Rama came into picture into the Mahabharata or in the life of Arjuna? Is there any relevant question here, or you can address it later on to you?
Well, I mean, these are two separate questions. The Hare Krishna mantra is there in the Vedas. Kalishantarana Upanishad, this mantra is mentioned there. So this mantra has always existed since time immemorial. And Lord Ramachandra was there in Treta Yuga. So the Pandavas, they also worship Lord Ramachandra. This Lord Ramachandra is widely worshipped by all, especially by all the kingly orders, because Lord Ramachandra was a ideal king. And so the Pandavas, they themselves
They had Hanuman on the flag.
They had Hanuman on the flag, so
yes,
they definitely worshipped Lord Ramachandra as well.
So, thank you. Let's see. Shashi. We were thinking about you.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I mean, the whole chapter, as you know, we have always discussed about this. Vishadam is the soul of my life too. I always feel that the war and it was all unnecessary, and the first chapter actually encompasses the whole thing that I always have struggled with. I'm still, I'm still trying to lean into the point that not all of us do have personal Krishna to guide us through every point. The ethics and divine and everything is so hypothetical. The only constant thing I do have in my life is the moral compass that I possess. I'm going to make my decisions based on that. But all through my education, my experiences teach me to drop the weapon and walk away from the war. That I have always maintained that. But I'm interested to see that what Krishna is going to do to convince that. But at this point, that's what I feel like. That compass is what makes me me.
Yeah.
But this is it's the everything that happens after this is counterintuitive to what I have always thought about life and war and the suffering in general. So I'm thinking I'm still trying to be convinced what is Krishna's argument against this. So I hope I will get more answers as we go along. And that's the dilemma. I mean, we always talked about this. I'm always so against the whole plan of that, but I hope it will give us also in our own life decisions, when to drop it, when to not to go to the war, when to go to the war, is something I'm always struggling with. So
Right.
I don't know how we can get that knowledge, because not everybody will be guided with the personal chariot which Krishna is driving. So hopefully we'll learn more. And
Yeah, there are a lot of assumptions in what what you just said, and I think as we talk more and we'll unravel some of them. But the main thing is that first of all, this is not about war. Krishna is not promoting that we have to pick up bow and arrow and go out and fight.
Because Krishna talks about, you'll see in Bhagavad-Gita how he defines humility and ahimsa as the essential qualities of a saintly person. So it's not that he's promoting war, but this particular war was fought for a very different reason and involved very different set of people. And so it doesn't mean that every time we have a conflict we have to go to war. That doesn't mean that. But at the same time,
it's the quality of a saintly person who can at any given point walk away and say, and in fact that's what Arjuna is trying to do. So
but at the same time,
what I mean, I remember we talked about this. I'm not personally anymore into that. I mean, I understand the point of the war was not the actual point that we need to from that. But the thing is that I promise I had a point, but I don't know if I'm gonna come to that or not. I kind of forgot it, but let me come back to it.
Okay. Thank you. So I don't know if there's
sorry. So because I do that constant thing I do have is my conscience, and I make choices based on that. So if in case I choose to drop my weapon and walk away, why should I be penalized with karma for an inaction? Because I feel like Lord has given me this liberty to make a choice based on my conscience and my morality. So why should it incur any kind of karma based on the inaction? So will it be wrong for Arjuna to walk away, stay and fight? I mean, I'm assuming I will learn more as the
yes.
But that's what I'm thinking, that whatever choice I make, why should it incur any kind of karma? Because that is the liberty and the choice that Lord has given me. So any choice shouldn't matter at that point.
Okay, so that's a discussion on karma, and we'll get to that. Hold on to that thought. It's a good thought, and for sure we'll get to it. And I think it's something it'll unravel on its own.
Yeah.
So thank you, Christiane. I don't know if there is. Okay.
So I think we are beyond time. We don't want to drag it any further. You have families to attend to, family dharma to attend to. So leave you to your family dharma and not let this dharma come in your way. So thank you all for joining. We'll see you tomorrow at 7:30.
So tomorrow we don't have a class, but we'll continue
with the japa.
Yeah, we'll continue the chanting, and then Monday we'll continue.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.